As President Trump escalates the war with Iran today, backlash from some of his strongest supporters.
This is not the United States' war.
My own feeling is no one should have to die for a foreign country. Our government's job is not to look out for Iran or for Israel. It's to look out for us.
I'm just going to be brutally frank. If it's going to be a hard slog, I mean, that was not pitched in the 2024 campaign. It just wasn't. We are going to bleed support.
I was promised that this wouldn't turn into a larger regional conflict. It's hard to believe it. It's hard to believe that at this point.
He was the no more endless wars candidate in 2016 and 2024, particularly, and this looks like an open betrayal of the base.
Joining me now, Michael Hardaway, former communications director to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, here in studio with me. Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden. And Maura Gillespie, founder of BlueStack Strategies and previous advisor to former House Speaker John Boehner. Welcome to you all. So, Michael, you first here. We have Trump, who's defended all the criticism by telling a journalist, quote, MAGA is Trump. But one professor told the Washington Post, quote, I think to them it feels legitimately like a betrayal on a fundamental tenet of Trumpism. Who gets to decide what MAGA is and who it's about? Certainly it's the president, but it's also cumulatively a bunch of Americans who've bought into it. And does it suggest that this is a test of how strong the president's grasp is on the MAGA wing?
Yeah, the base decides what MAGA is, and many of the right-wing influencers who supported him and helped him win in the election have abandoned him over the past week. They are furious over his decision to start this war. I mean, I would argue that who would believe Donald Trump during the campaign when he says he doesn't believe in more wars? Of course he would go back on his word, and that's what has happened. I think he's in trouble as we look to the midterm elections. Where's the energy in terms of what Republicans will need to hold the House and the Senate if people are abandoning ship? We already know that independents have already abandoned ship from Donald Trump.
So, Maura, the Post did an analysis of 79 conservative politicians and commentators' comments on the Iran conflict. Most did support it. Only a few were staunchly opposed. So why has criticism gained so much traction? Where do everyday MAGA voters stand on it?
You know, your question to Michael, I thought of something that my former boss, John Boehner, used to say. He said, you know, a leader without followers is just a guy out taking a walk. And I think the President Trump is going to find himself in a position where he's not going to have many people behind him as he continues to really flip on them about what he has said in the past. And really, to the people who have supported him thus far, well, did they support him because he said that he was striking Iran to help those who had fought for their freedom, and then said that, you know, he wanted them to take this opportunity to choose their next leader? But then just days later saying that he wants to be very involved in who they choose to lead Iran next. So I think that it's going to be tough to be so contradictory. And if you're out there defending him on the day that he says one thing, what do you do the day he says something completely different? And I think that what you're seeing finally is there are people who are just fed up with being lied to and want some semblance of truth and transparency and just a frank conversation. We haven't really had that from the president. He didn't give us an address to the nation when he chose to make these strikes. He did it in a pre-recorded video from Mar-a-Lago. So I think there's this appetite for transparency. And there's a big disconnect between conservatives who are on, you know, media talking to the press and talking to people who are watching, and then the people who are actually voting.
You know, Megan, Maura makes a very important point. The president has not addressed the nation in your typical fashion, a speech behind a podium that is inside the White House. Why not? And must he do that?
I think that he needs to do that. I think the country deserves that. I mean, we lost 6 people in the very first week of this war. I mean, that is unconscionable that he doesn't think that he should be
the second day.
Exactly. So it's unconscionable that he doesn't think that he needs to address the nation. He's losing support minute by minute. He has not made a justification of why this was necessary and why it is necessary right now. The American people are understanding. We understand that democracy is fragile and that other countries should participate in democracies. And we understand that. But you have to bring the country along. You have to tell them why you're doing it, what the justifications are. You can't just say, oh, gas prices might rise. Oh, well, you know, it's war. People are going to die. Oh, well, like the callous nature of which he's approaching this, I think is really going to wear thin on the American people. And the Republicans that are running in the midterms are the ones that are going to pay the price.
How much, Michael, is the low public support right now influenced by the messaging by this administration in this conflict? You've got the White House. They're using memes. They're using video game footage. They're interspersing it with, Hollywood film highlights. This is not a game. And when asked about the concerns of more retaliatory attacks after 6 U.S. service members were killed, Trump responded with, like I said, some people will die. When you go to war, some people will die. I mean, how do you describe this rhetoric?
I think the messaging is obviously problematic, but his biggest problem is this economic disaster that he's overseen. I think that's why you're seeing low poll numbers across the board for him. You've got nearly 100,000 people last month that lost their job. Yeah. You have more than 7 million people unemployed in America. And then you've got all these rising prices. Gas is up around 14% over just the last week, among all of these other things. And so for Donald Trump, his problem is both substance, but also communication with these childish memes and these very offensive and dismissive ways he talks about war and loss.
Gas prices, Maura, where do things stand in terms of the public support of this war as they go to the pump and they see how much they're having to pay because of the spike in oil prices?
It becomes a problem. There's trackers already going on day by day that are showing the numbers go up. And again, when you're faced with this problem about affordability, that the president says one day isn't real, next day it's a hoax, and now saying that it's an invented word, that's a real impact that everyday Americans face. And it just, unfortunately for the MAGA world, and they're going to see him separate himself from reality, from the people who put him in the White House in the first place. And again, it shows the lack of severity that he's taking on the situations at hand that he is responsible for, and that he's supposed to be the leader of this country, of the free world, but also sympathizing and empathizing and recognizing the reality. And he has really lacked, not just in this term, but in his first administration, the empathy factor. And it's starting to really wear on people because they're facing the hardships and he is not.
It's also, Megyn, people did not vote for this. On the campaign trail, he said, no new wars, and I'm going to make the economy great, and your cost of living is going to come down. Not so much.
No, absolutely not. And Michael is right here with the messaging and the affordability issue at home. People would be more understanding about going to war at $1 billion a day if they could afford their groceries at home, if they could afford gas. So he's fighting on two different fronts here. And it seems that he cares more about distractions and more about his own legacy, which is disastrous at the moment, than taking care of the American people who voted for him, who wanted him to bring down prices, who wanted him to not enter into foreign wars. So, he does have a messaging problem, but again, he is not going to pay the political consequences for it. It's the Republican Party in the midterms and then going into the 28 presidential election are the ones that are going to have to answer for his mistakes here and ultimately the American people.
Okay, Michael, Megyn, Maura, thank you all so much for weighing in. Appreciate you all.